Hello all, and welcome to Bubbler Banter on the Brew Sports Network, bound to be your favorite Wisconsin sports show. I'm Josh Scheibe, and I'm here with my friend Ian DeMarse. We'll be here every Thursday morning from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Central Time, and we'll be giving our thoughts on the most recent Wisconsin sports news. I'm excited. Ian, Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited too, Josh.
All right. Well, let's give a small introduction for all the people at home who either don't know us or who might need a refresher on us. Go ahead.
All right, so for anyone who doesn't know what a Youper is, that's who I am. That means I was born in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and I moved down to Wisconsin. I've been here for the past 5 years. I went to school at Wisconsin Lutheran College, where I played college football, and brought the team their first conference championship in school history. Was an all-conference lineman my senior year, and now I'm fully living here in Milwaukee. This is my first year fully down here, and I'm pretty excited to be on the show.
Well, glad to have you here. Glad to be here with you.
Oh, yeah.
I, personally, have... my name is Josh Scheibe, first of all. I am a Milwaukee-based podcaster, actor, and writer. My sports knowledge is a little different than pretty much all the other hosts we have here on the network. I actually have not played sports since I was in grade school. But my most recent experience in the sports world would be actually the Game Master on What's the Score, the sports news quiz. It is a show that we do every weekend, and one of the few podcasts that I do, in addition to a couple of others now. And very excited to be here on Brew Sports and here for Bubbler Banter. So let's move right ahead then into our first segment. We're moving into what we call Hoop Scoops, and we're talking about the Bucks.
Oh, yeah, the good old Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, they've had a pretty bad week on the court overall with the injury to Michael Beasley.
Yeah.
But Giannis Antetokounmpo is still putting up amazing numbers, being compared to everybody from LeBron James to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But as good as the Greek Freak is, and as big as the Greek Freak is, he can't carry everybody, right?
No, he can't. I mean, it hurts that, well, you already lost Jabari Parker for the season due to that ACL injury, but now you lose Beasley for the next few games because of his hyperextended left knee, and they got a big stretch of games coming up. Mm-hmm. These next 12 games that they have are going to tell how the end of the season goes for the Bucks.
So how do you think it's going to go?
Honestly, I kind of have it planned out. So the next five of their next 6 games are at home, and their next 2 are against big powerhouse teams, one from the West, one from the East, and the Clippers and the Raptors. I feel like they have to win at least one of those games. Mm-hmm. And then going into next week, they go to, I think, Philadelphia on Monday, and then they have 3 home games against the Knicks, the Pacers, and the Timberwolves. If they can win all 4 of those games going into their 6-game Western Conference road trip, so that'll be pretty tough. And if they go at least 3-3 in that road trip, I feel like they're going to be in that 8th spot in the East. If they struggle at home, they're definitely not going to be in that playoff picture anymore.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm thankful to Corey Piper here. I think he says, I think they call him the Greek Freak because they can't say his real name. Josh nailed it. Thank you. Thank you. I have spent all week trying to learn how to say that.
Yeah.
Not actually true, but yeah.
I mean, they definitely do have a tough time saying his name, but giving him the nickname the Greek Freak, I mean, it's a big name that everyone will know instead of just saying.
Absolutely.
I can't even say his last name, to be honest. I always struggle with it.
Well, actually, in other Bucks news, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is actually here today in Milwaukee.
Oh, wow.
He's giving a presentation or a lecture at UWM today, which I didn't realize until I saw that news this morning. He actually stopped off at Rufus King and talked to some people there.
Okay.
So, Kareem, if you happen to be interested, if you're watching the show at all, we'd love to have you on sometime. Just let us know. Our people will talk to your people, meaning maybe we'll send you an email sometime later today.
Kareem, we love you. Come join the show.
So, I think any other thoughts on potentially next season even for the Bucks?
Next season, it's kind of hard to pinpoint right now just with how their season's going. I mean, if it was last year where we knew they weren't going to make the playoffs, we could probably discuss it more. I know one of the big things that's going to happen is Greg Monroe going to decline his contract, his option on his contract, and become a free agent? That'll be a key thing because I feel like he wants to be a starter. He's not really used to being a bench player and getting used to that the past couple of years. It's worked out somewhat for the Bucks as he's been their leading scorer off the bench, but I'm not sure exactly if that's what he wants. I feel like he wants to be the big guy on the team. He wants to be the one that scores for them.
All right. Oh, thank you, Kurt. A non-sports guy, he says, a non-sports guy and a football player talking basketball more coherently than most basketball hosts. Great job, guys. Thank you, Kurt. It's great to hear something like that on our first show and our first segment here. Let's head into our next one then, on that note. The Green Bay Packers had an interesting and a very exciting and very frustrating season. They played to the bitter end, and it was indeed bitter.
Yes.
Now comes what I have come to call actually the cheesehead conundrum. Packers fans are widely known around the league for being some of the best, if not the best. Speaking from personal experience
here. You should look at
here.
Twitter more often, Josh.
But they're also known for being some of the most mercurial. You know, have you noticed this where even if it's a playoff season, you know, the Packers get to the playoffs, they do things that nobody expected them to do. Mm-hmm. If they achieve anything less than greatness, then the folks at home, you know, they're calling for the heads of the entire roster and the head coach, and most especially the general manager.
Oh, yeah.
You notice this at all?
Yeah, I definitely noticed it. I mean, it happens a lot with other teams, but with the Packers having, like, the biggest fan base in the NFL, it's going to happen more with them, especially when you have a great quarterback with Aaron Rodgers, solid receiving core, a decent running game when Lacey is healthy. The defense has always kind of been the issue. It was looking good at the beginning of the year, and then we had the big issue with the cornerbacks.
Right. Yep. So do you think what do you think they're going to do in the offseason? They've got a couple of choices here. It would be, you know, either do the tried and mostly true Ted Thompson way of drafting young and trying to train up for a couple seasons down the road, or they could try to pick up a couple of free agents and see if they can't, you know, push their way into the big game this year. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, Ted Thompson, I hope you're listening, because you need to stop drafting young cornerbacks. They've done it the last few years, and it hasn't really worked out too well. They need to bring in a guy. They need to sign a veteran that's going to be a mentor to these guys. It doesn't have to be a guy who's going to stay for like the next 3 or 4 years. Just sign a guy to at least a 1-2 year deal just to help mentor these guys and help them improve and know that they're ready to play in the NFL. I had a couple guys in mind. The first guy I was thinking of was a former Packer, Tramon Williams. He was recently let go by the Browns. He didn't have that good of a season last year, but he played a lot when he was in Green Bay. I always thought he was a solid corner for them, and I feel like he could definitely bring some leadership to the Packers.
And he knows the Capers schemes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that'll be helpful to them, too, because he might not be the guy who's going to be the number one lockdown corner, but maybe at the beginning of the season he can do that, and then once he's helping mentor these younger corners, one of them can step up, like Randall or even Gunter.
So do you think that there are any other folks that they should pick up for free agents, or should they just focus on the cornerbacks this time around?
I had another corner in mind. I definitely do think they need to go after a couple of different guys, but a guy that was recently let go, I don't know if they'll go after him because of his legal issues, but honestly, I think Darrelle Revis could be a big signee for the Packers because he's not the corner he was anymore, but this guy knows the game of football. This guy was one of the best corners, if not the best corner in football. I would say 5 years ago. He hasn't done that well the last couple of years due to injuries and just not being on that good of teams. I just remember watching him last year, first game of the season. He was getting torched by A.J. Green. I was thinking, is A.J. Green playing that good, or is Darrelle Revis playing that bad? And after watching Darrelle Revis this season, I was like, he just played that bad. Mm-hmm. So I feel like if he comes, he doesn't have to be the guy for them. He knows that now with his age being older. And I know he has some issues right now with the law, with everything that's happened with him, but I feel like being in the Packers locker room, that'll definitely be something that the Packers can definitely help him with.
Sure. Do you think they should go after Adrian Peterson if Adrian Peterson becomes available? Because they've been kind of weak in the running back area for a couple of seasons now.
I feel like they should definitely give it an option. I'm not saying that they have to, but they should at least consider it. I mean, I read yesterday that Eddie Lacy and his agent have talked to Ted Thompson about getting a new deal. Not a long-term deal, probably just another 1-year deal, maybe 2 years, hoping that he gets that form back where he was in 2014 and 15 where he was running over 1,100 yards. But honestly, I feel like even if they do sign Lacy back, they should still go after Peterson. Yes, I know they have Ty Montgomery, but Peterson still has a few solid years left in him. He could definitely be that guy who can mentor Eddie Lacy, get him in the solid shape that he should be. We don't want to see the big old Eddie Lacy who's struggling to get to the end zone like we did against the Arizona Cardinals in the playoffs a couple years ago.
Sure. You don't think AP would be a liability at all in the backfield?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like you have power and speed with him. With Lacy, you just have power. I do like how they converted Montgomery to running back because he's got that speed factor. He's got that receiving factor. But I feel like maybe just signing AP to a one-year deal could definitely boost that offense. As big as it already is, that'll be probably one of the pieces that could help them get to that Super Bowl, even with the defense not as it should, where it is right now.
Jeff on Facebook asks us, is this Thompson's last draft? What do you think? There's been some talk about this, of him stepping down as GM.
I feel like they've been saying this the last few years just because of what's happened with the Packers. But like I said, it kind of depends on how next season goes. Mm-hmm. If it's worse than this season, yes, I feel like it could be his last season. If it's similar to last season, I feel like the Packers are going to want to keep him just because of the fact that they're still winning and they're still making the playoffs. Obviously, if they do very well this year, then he's going to stay. But honestly, Ted Thompson has to do some changes. He cannot just focus on getting young guys. Even though that's important to a team, he has to realize you have to go out there and get some big free. They don't have to be huge signees that are going to be stars. They just need to get some free agents. I did like the one move they did last year, getting Jared Cook. That was a big factor for the offense. Yes, he was injured, but he's definitely a solid playmaker that they do need.
And it sounds like they're planning on re-signing him, from what I can see.
And that's a solid move. I do think that one move they should try doing is attack the tight end position in the draft. Nothing bad about Richard Rodgers, but he just hasn't developed the way I thought he would.
Sure, he's been a passable player, but he hasn't been outstanding. Mm-hmm. And you see players like Gronkowski and others who are really, really great. And it'd be great to have somebody on their roster who could fill a role like that.
Yeah, that's definitely something they should do. Another position they should try getting in the draft, I would actually say, would probably be outside linebacker. I know they already have Clay Matthews, but you look at Nick Perry, he had a great season, but he's been really inconsistent. He's been injured throughout his career, and I honestly don't think the Packers are going to try re-signing him. Julius Peppers is coming towards the end of his career, so I'm not sure if they're going to want to keep him. He might even retire this year. They should definitely try going after someone in the draft. Even TJ Watt, I heard, was rumored to be a possible guy, a guy from Wisconsin. So that would definitely be a solid fit for them after he had a great year for the Badgers.
Yeah. I'm also curious. Actually, we've got another comment here. One moment. How old is Thompson? I don't have the answer to that. Do you have the answer to that?
I do not have the answer to that.
Oh, actually, Michael here says 25, but that was pre-Kardashian aging. Let's not get into that at all. Actually, let's move on then to our next little segment here. We're calling it Base Instinct. It's about the Brew Crew. It's time for spring training and for some contract renegotiations, but some of the players aren't playing ball. Isn't that right, Ian?
Yeah, it's definitely true. It's that great time of the year again with spring training. We get to see all the teams go to Arizona or Florida. We get all these non-roster invites that get their chance to make the big league teams. It's definitely an exciting part of the year.
So how do you think they're gonna turn out in the next season?
Well, to be honest, I thought last year was going to be terrible. I mean, not that last year was actually surprising me. I thought last year they were going to lose over 100 games. They were just going to trade all their best players. I thought Braun was for sure going to be gone. But they surprised, not just me, they surprised a lot of people. They competed in every game. They had a lot of young guys that showed up and definitely stepped their game up. They didn't trade Ryan Braun, which surprised me. They did trade Luke Croy, which wasn't that big of a surprise. We kind of figured he was going to be gone.
Right.
But honestly, I feel like they're going to compete even more this year, and they could flirt with the playoffs, but I think they're about 1 year away from being a wild card team. I
would say so, yeah. It seems like they're still building this new team, building up a lot of these young guys into better players. Not that they're bad players necessarily, but they're young and they're inexperienced, and I think another couple of seasons perhaps, and they'll be a better contender.
Yeah, exactly. Once I had one of my friends who I was working with during the summer say, the Brewers in 5 years, they're going to be the Cubs last year. I'm like, that's saying a lot because the Cubs, they were very good last year.
Obviously, the Cubs were good.
Yes.
Surprisingly good. They won the World Series, which...
They broke the curse.
Exactly. Jeff actually asked on Facebook, why do you think they didn't move Braun?
I felt like they tried moving Braun. I know San Francisco was a big one that they were trying to move to because they needed an outfielder. But honestly, I just felt like they didn't move him because the things they wanted in return they couldn't get.
Sure. Do you think it was also maybe because of having the name recognition of Ryan Braun still on the Brewers?
I would definitely say that's a thing too, by far.
Okay. That was kind of my thought. Because, Ryan Braun, he's had a bit of controversy, obviously, in the past few years with the whole
winning
doping
MVP,
scandal.
getting caught for steroids, not getting caught for steroids.
Right. Yeah. So I wonder if it was maybe part of that. Partially as well.
Yeah, that definitely could be a possibility.
Yeah, people were not as inclined to pick him up just because of some of that controversy that he's been
honestly,
facing.
I think Braun wants to be in Milwaukee. He wants to see this team grow, and he wants to be that older veteran on the team that helps lead them and to succeed.
I would agree with that, yeah. So, let's see here. Any other thing?
Oh, yeah. Should we talk about Jonathan VR?
We should.
Okay.
We should definitely talk about that. Yeah, his contract is expiring, isn't it?
Yeah, it's they talked, I believe, last week about giving him a contract extension, and he decided to turn that down. And I feel like that's a good thing for both him and the Brewers, if you look at it. Well, it's good for him because, who knows, he could have a better season than they did last year. Yeah, he led the league in stolen bases, but he could definitely improve as a hitter. And remember, he is switching to second base. That's his third position move in over a year. Because he was a shortstop, they brought up Arcia, they moved him to third base, they traded for Travis Shaw, and now they move him back to second base. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs there. I mean, it is still within the infield, so he should know what to do, but it's definitely a big thing that can change how he plays.
Sure. Yeah, do you think part of that is just that they've been trying to find the right place for him?
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely a possibility.
Okay.
But, I mean, like I said before, if he improves as a hitter, I feel like he definitely has the potential to be an all-star this year.
Sure.
Definitely could be the one all-star for the Brewers. Because Braun definitely should have made it, in my opinion, last year. But
yeah?
I feel like he definitely will be an all-star or be in consideration to be an all-star for the NL this season.
All right.
And then, like I said, it could also be good for the Brewers because from what I read, they wanted to offer him $20 million a year, which it's pretty good if you're a baseball player.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But this
pretty
could
good if you're anybody.
Yeah, this could be good for the Brewers because what if he doesn't have the year he had last year? What if he struggles at the plate? What if he struggles at second base? What if he gets injured? Or what if he doesn't steal as many bases? That could bring his price down, which could save the Brewers some money to maybe go after someone else to help that team.
What do you think the pitching's going to look like this year?
I'm pretty excited for it.
Yeah.
They have a very young staff. Davies is the guy who you never would think would be a solid pitcher. He's just a really small, scrawny guy, but he only throws about 91 miles an hour, but he gets the job done, and that's something that surprised me, and it's definitely probably surprised the Brewers last year, if you definitely think so.
Yeah, it seems like they're developing some depth as well at the pitcher position. So
also like Junior Guerra I think he was like a 30. He's like 30 or something, and they listed him as a rookie last year. From what I said.
Really?
From what I saw, yeah.
I must have missed that. Wow.
He was like a 30-year-old rookie. I'm like, this guy, that's worse than Brandon Whedon when he came to the NFL. He was like 26 years old.
Yeah. Wow. I did not realize he was 30. Wow.
It was somewhere around there.
Okay.
Also like Nelson for them. Also like Chase Anderson. They definitely have the pitching that's once they figure out who's going to pitch where in the rotation, the pitching's going to be solid for them. It'll be good this year, but 2 years down the road, this is going to be one of the best rotations in the National League, in my opinion.
I would say you're probably right. Yeah, I'm excited to see where things go with these guys. And we're going to actually move on, I think, again, next to our next segment, Badge of Honor. We're going to be talking about the Badgers, and the conference tournament is coming up. What do you think their chances are here?
Well, if you look at the recent play for them, it hasn't been that well. They've lost 4 or 5, and of those 4 losses, 3 of them have come to teams that are on the border of making the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Losing at home to Northwestern, that hurts. Yes, I believe that Bronson Koenig, that was a stretch where he was starting to get a little injured, so that definitely could have played a factor. Then you lose at Michigan, but that was without Bronson Koenig, so that was definitely a factor going in. Then they get a good win against a solid Maryland team, but then they lose at Ohio State, which is a team outside of the tournament. You don't want to have those losses.
No, that's one of the worst things that could happen at this point.
And then they lose at Michigan State, another bubble team.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like they have, with the next 2 games, it's a good thing they're at home, so that'll help them. They play Iowa, definitely a team you have to look out for because Peter Jock is a very good scorer for them. And then they play against Minnesota, a team that's on the border of being a top 25 team. So I feel like the advantage is definitely in their favor now with them games being at home, but they definitely do need to figure out what the issue is.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. It's like you said, the last 4 or 5 games they've lost, and that's not where you want to be heading into this time of the year.
Yeah, what do you have you noticed like what might be the issue for them in these last 4 or 5 games?
I almost wonder if it's just they're getting tired.
That definitely could be.
You know, that I haven't been able to put my finger on anything else specifically other than a couple of injuries, perhaps.
Yeah, and you also, going into the injuries, how healthy is Bronson Koenig? I mean, he did miss that one game against Michigan. He just hasn't been the same recently.
No, and I hope it's not a situation like they do in Green Bay, where we're not going to tell you about it. We're not going to tell you what the injury is, or we're not going to tell you the extent of the injury, and they're going to keep playing. I hope it's not a situation like that because, these young guys, sure, they can bounce back a little more easily from injuries, but even so, you don't want to have to deal with that. So I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, I was watching the game against Michigan State this past weekend, and I saw that Nigel Hayes, I think it was definitely way over 20 shots in the game. And I've looked at his career against Michigan State. It hasn't been that good. So for him to take that many shots against a team that you never play well against kind of puts a question in my head saying, why is he taking this many shots if he's struggled against them in the past, especially at Michigan State he has struggled. I believe he shot 4 or 12 from the free throw line. And I saw someone tweet, he definitely should have went to the draft last year. You look at the beginning of the year, he was playing solid for them, and I was thinking he's definitely going to help his draft stock. But with a game like that, that's definitely going to hurt your draft stock. He might not even get drafted this year.
That's true. Yeah, that would be disappointing as well. So we got a couple of questions here. Baxter, are Frank and Sam the best to ever play for the Badgers? What do you think?
I was a big Frank Kaminsky fan, so I would definitely say he's one of the best Badgers ever. Sam Decker was definitely, I would say, inconsistent until the 1 year before the draft because he'd always have those games where he comes out, gives you like 17, 18 points, and people are like, oh, he's such a great player. And then he'll have those games where he goes like 2 of 10 from the field and struggles. But I feel like those two working together were definitely one of the best. I'm not sure if I would say they're the best. Yes, they did lead them to the national championship game a few years ago, but they didn't get that W. And I feel like if they would have got that W, they would have been the best ever. But because they didn't get that W and they blew a lead against Duke, I would say they're probably top 3, but they're not the best.
Okay.
I don't know. What would you think?
Well, like you said, I've always been a Frank Kaminsky fan. I'm pretty much with you on this. I would say,
Were you the one that liked the Frank the Tank nickname?
It was all right. It was no Greek freak, but Frank the Tank was pretty good. We do have another question. Do you think the coach is doing a good job motivating them? That is a big part of any team, especially at this time of the year.
Yeah.
So that could be part of the problem.
It could be part of the problem, but I feel like that the main issue, definitely coaching is part of the issue, and I feel like the reason is Ethan Happ has to get more touches. I was looking at those last 5 games, and in 2 of those games he had over 20 points. The win against Maryland and the loss against Michigan. But remember, Bronson Koenig didn't play that game. And then you look at the other 3 losses, he's taking only about 10 shots a game. He hasn't scored in double figures. He has to get more touches because he's their best big guy. He's one of the best, if not the best, big man in the NCAA, in my opinion, because he's got so many moves. I hope he stays at Wisconsin. I feel like with the season he's had, he definitely could go to the NBA, but I don't know. I just feel like these next 2 games, they have to give him the ball more. He has to get at least 15 points a game, I feel, in my opinion. And for them to do well in the tournament, like I said, he has to get the ball. Kanan has to be Mr. Clutch as he's been in the past. And Nigel Hayes has to know when to take the right shots, because you can't have a game like he did against Sunday and take 20 shots and then miss 8 free throws.
Yeah, and Corey on Facebook says it's been a tough month to be a Badger fan, and that is true. But, it's going to be very interesting. They could bounce back.
Yeah, they
definitely You never know.
could.
They've got the potential to, I think.
Absolutely. I feel like they definitely will be able to do that, but I just feel like they have to give Hap the ball. He's their best player. They need to give him the ball.
Yeah, I would agree. That's just how you do it.
Oh, yeah.
You gotta give it to the best guy on the team, and thus far, he looks like it.
Yeah.
So
he's definitely been the best guy.
All right, well, let's move on then to our other segment.
All right.
Or do you have something? You're giving me this look.
No, I just want. Are you excited about this next segment as I am?
I am excited. I'm excited. I'm excited about this segment, yes.
You look like you were at a loss of words there for a second.
It's what we're calling the Oval of Life. Yes, folks, we're talking about NASCAR. I didn't pick this one. That was all him.
Yes, I'm a pretty big NASCAR fan. I grew up with NASCAR. My dad is probably the biggest Matt Kenseth fan you ever see. Just watching a race with him is so tough because if he's doing well, he gets super excited. I remember he crashed this weekend, and he was just blowing up a big storm about it. I'm like, Dad, it's the first race of the year. Just relax. He'll probably compete in the playoffs. It's the first race. Just give it a break.
Yeah, and, this is not necessarily local sports, which is what we're trying to focus on in this, but in this particular show. But it is big in the Midwest. It's one of the bigger sports.
It's not
that
as
people
big
don't
as it is down south, but it definitely is pretty big in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Especially with Milwaukee having the Milwaukee Mile.
Right, and obviously the Daytona 500 just wrapped up.
Yeah,
and,
definitely one of the best that I've seen so far.
I will admit I did not watch it.
You missed a good one, Josh.
That's what I've heard. So what did you think of the results of that?
It was definitely, I was not expecting some of it, but I loved that the competition was so much better with the new rules that they put in place this year. It's making drivers compete. It's changing the strategies of the race by far. We had tons of cars coming in the pits 10 laps into the race. That's something you never see unless it's a caution. This was during the green flag. It's just crazy how the strategies are now different with all these segments. Drivers are competing 60 laps into the race instead of just the last 15, 20 laps.
Sure.
It's definitely something that's going to help the sport, in my opinion.
All right, and let's see here. Oh, this is a good question. What makes Wisconsin sports so special? I feel like they're just better overall than most states. What do you think? Would you agree with that?
I mean, I feel like you definitely, I don't know exactly, because I'm from Michigan, so I've never really been around Wisconsin sports as much. I mean, what would you say about it?
Well, personally, I think, we've got the Packers, who are just a huge...
Yeah, when you have one of the best teams in a sport,
absolutely, and for such a long time, too. My entire life, basically, between the Brett Favre era and now the Rodgers era.
Oh, let's make this clear. Just because I was born in Michigan doesn't mean I'm a Lions fan. I love the Packers. I was a born Packers fan. Good man.
But we've also got the Bucks, who have been okay.
Yeah, they definitely do have a bright future, and it's going to take some time. I mean, I remember when they signed Greg Monroe, people thought they were going to be a top 4 team. But honestly, I'm like, he's a good signing. He's a great scorer. He does lack defense, in my opinion. It's going to take some time for everything to work out.
And I will say, this is the first Bucks team that I'm really excited about paying attention to since the Ray Allen days. Yeah. When I really,
those were the good days.
Those were the good days when I really kind of I ended up stopping watching the Bucks for a long time.
I remember, I think it was 2001. They made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, and I read an article. I want to say a few weeks ago that said that series was fixed because the NBA did not want the Bucks to host the finals because they're the market wise.
Aaron says here, Wisconsin sports rock so much that Ian crossed state lines. And you are officially now a Wisconsin sports fan. Is that true?
Yes.
That is true?
It definitely has changed ever since I've been down here. Just, I always liked the Bucks, but then knowing that I'm only like 10, 15 minutes away from where they play, and then I've been to 4 or 5 games this year. They're always exciting to go to. Like I said, I've always been a Packer fan, so that's always been a great thing. Wisconsin college, that's kind of been on the border for me. I've always been a Michigan Wolverines fan.
Sure.
But I am starting to lean towards more Wisconsin, but you can't take the Michigan Wolverines out of me. I'm always going to be a Wolverines fan. I remember my gift for Christmas, someone asked me, "Oh, what's your favorite college sports team?" And I think she was hoping I was going to say Wisconsin, but I'm like, no, it's Michigan. And then I get the gift, and people are like, we had such a hard time making this gift because we're all Wisconsin fans, and yet you're a Michigan fan. I'm like, I like Wisconsin, but they're never going to top Michigan, in my opinion, as much as I like Wisconsin.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see, like we said before, what the Brewers are doing. And, the Brewers have been not so great for a while now. But like we said, all of these teams seem to have a lot of potential.
Yeah.
I mean, they're really young teams.
It's definitely a factor in baseball because of all the farm systems, all the prospects that people talk about in trades. You don't really think about it much at first, but you realize that it takes a while to get into the big leagues unless you're a born superstar. It could take... If you're in the minors, it could take you 3, 4, 5 years before you touch the big leagues. So it's definitely a longer process than it does in like the NFL or the NBA or the NHL.
Oh, boy. Baxter here says NASCAR can't really be justified as a real sport. They don't do anything but drive. I do that every day in my car to work. Ooh, them's fighting words, Baxter.
I hear that all the time. People say that NASCAR is not a real sport. If you look at the conditions they drive in, the way the cars handle, it's definitely a big factor. And then you hear some of these NASCAR drivers talk about during their interviews how they have to train just to be ready to drive.
Yeah, between the heat, the speed, the G-forces, it's incredibly stressful on the body.
Yeah, Jimmy Johnson, he runs marathons. He trains so well. I mean, no wonder why if the non-NASCAR fans know he's won 7 championships. He's definitely the best driver in NASCAR. I'm not the biggest Jimmy Johnson fan, but you have to respect that. I mean, there was a stretch where I believe he won 6 straight championships.
Wow.
He was the Bulls of NASCAR.
So, Baxter, there you have it. If you want to try doing NASCAR, go right ahead. We'll see what happens.
I know NASCAR doesn't seem as exciting because people always say all they do is turn left, they turn left. I'm like, have you seen a road race? They do turn right in a road race. They do. And those races are fun to watch. But let's get back to NASCAR. We should talk about the new system. Did you know about the changes that they made this past season?
I looked a little bit at them.
Okay.
What exactly are they? Because I'm not all that familiar with what the rules were.
Okay. So they had a couple of changes this year. One of the main changes before we get into the whole segments and everything, they changed sponsors. They used to be the Sprint Cup Series.
Okay.
Now they're the Monster Cup Series. I believe that's what's pronounced. It was definitely interesting when I saw it because I know a couple drivers, their car sponsors are Monster. So I didn't know how that was going to get into play. But anyway, let's get to the changes that they made for the racing. They changed it to where they do segments. And the only time they usually do segments throughout the season is during the All-Star race. And usually what that means is they usually do 3 or 4 segments. They do last week they split into 3 segments. They did 60 laps, and 80 laps. And during the segments, wherever you finish, if you're in the top 10, you get points added on to the points you get at the end of the race. So first place gets 10, second gets 9, goes all the way down to 10 where you only get 1 point. And that could definitely play a big factor because you could crash at the end of the race but still have a solid point stay if you finish in the top 10 during the first 2 segments. But,
good to know because I honestly do not pay all that much attention to NASCAR. I've never been a big NASCAR fan. I don't really have anything against it. It's just it's never really interested me.
Can you name me 5 NASCAR drivers right now? I'm putting you on the spot here. I kind of want to see this.
Matt Kenseth, Dale Earnhardt Jr.,
Active drivers.
Okay, well, that doesn't help.
That's okay. You got two so far. I said one earlier, so you should remember that.
Yeah, I should remember, but I don't. I think that's about the extent of my knowledge.
At least you said Matt Kenseth, because he's a Maine, Wisconsin driver.
Right.
So that's definitely
that I did know.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, the key thing that I'm liking about the new segment is it's making it way more competitive. And NASCAR did some interesting things to make it more competitive. Like I said, we saw different strategies during the race. We saw, I believe it was the Toyota cars, they started pitting 10 laps into the race under green flag conditions, which is something you never see in NASCAR. You never see it. But with the fact that if they pit early, they can go to the end of the first segment and possibly finish in the top 10, which is definitely something that worked out for them in their favor.
So Jeff asks, he wants a little clarification here. So they have races within the race?
That's kind of how it is. So
okay.
It's split into 3 different segments, as I said before. Mm-hmm. When it hits 2 laps to go in that segment, unless it's the final one because they just go to the end. But the first 2 segments, when it hits 2 laps to go, no one can go to pit road. If you go to pit road, I believe you get penalized. I'm not exactly sure because we really didn't see anything happen with it. But it's definitely something that definitely changed the game. I do know that Danica Patrick, she's been struggling since she came to NASCAR. Mm-hmm. She, I believe, placed in the top 10 both times in the segment, and yet she crashed towards the end of the race, and yet she still had a solid points day.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's definitely something that's going to change driver strategies.
Sure. So it might be a bit of an equalizer.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's basically what it is. And they also did something different with what happens if you crash during a race. So whenever the caution comes out, if you have to do some repairs to your car, you have only 5 minutes to do it. So once you hit pit road, you have 5 minutes to do any changes you have without replacing any old parts. If it takes longer than 5 minutes, then you have to go to the garage. And if you go to the garage, you're automatically out for the race.
Right.
Where it used to be before, if you had something that needed to be replaced, you go to the garage, you get it put on, you go back out to the race, you get some points, you're down like 15, 20 laps, but you still salvage your day a little bit.
Sure. So it's just a matter of now if they go to the garage, you're out. You're done.
Yeah.
No more coming back.
Once you hit that 5 minutes, you are done.
Okay.
So you go down and you get your 5 minutes, you come back out. If you still have issues, you come back on, but then you can fix them as you need.
Gotcha. Baxter comes back and says, I gave up NASCAR for Lent when I was a kid and decided to never go back.
Baxter, that was one of the worst decisions you ever made. You got to give it a try. Definitely tune in this Sunday. They're in Atlanta, so that'll definitely be a good race.
Yeah? You think so?
I think so.
Why do you think it's going to be a good one?
I just feel like after what we saw in Daytona usually it's a really competitive race just because it's a restrictor plate race, so usually all the cars are more tightly packed together. But this will be the first track where we see all the cars more separated more. We're going to see a lot more competing early on in the race, which is definitely something that like I said, I really like about the new system. I don't know how long people are if it's going to help NASCAR or not, but I feel like just from what we saw in the Daytona 500, it's definitely something important. Also, shout out to Kurt Busch for finally winning the Daytona 500. He had a few second place finishes, and it was a little weird if you didn't watch it. Chase Elliott started the race on the pole, was dominating the race for the most part, was leading with 10 laps to go, and then towards the end ran out of gas, which is something we would figure we'd see with cars, because I was listening to the race and people are like, I don't know how many cars are actually going to make it to the end, because they pitted with like 48, 50 laps to go, and then you had some cars that pitted a little after that they knew for sure were going to make it. But it was interesting to see how many of these cars would actually run out of gas, because from me watching Daytona 500s before, I've never really seen that as an issue. But we see Elliott lose gas. Kyle Larson was leading into the final lap. He ran out of gas. I know one of my favorite drivers, Casey Kane, he ran out of gas, and I was like, oh, he had a shot this year. And then you see a guy who wasn't really talked about much during the race, Kurt Busch, who, like I said before, he, I believe, had 3 second-place finishes. So he's been so close. And I felt like you couldn't really top last year's because it was the closest finish last year in Daytona 500 history. But this definitely did, just because of the way everyone competed, and to see a guy who wasn't really talked about much during the race win the race. So it was definitely impressive. And also, his car was one of the ones that is sponsored by Monster. So that was definitely a good thing for the series too.
Well, great. And yes, so congratulations to Kurt Busch. And we are just about ready to wrap up now. But one question before we do, really quickly for you. Bubbler or water fountain?
Oh, you had to ask
I had to ask.
question.
It's bubbler banter. Come on.
Yeah, that is true. Like I said, I'm from Michigan, so I can't. The first time I heard bubbler was my senior year of high school. We had someone move from Wisconsin, and they said that they called their water fountain a bubbler. And I tend to stay away from bubbler. I'm not the biggest fan of it being a bubbler. I don't call it a water fountain because people are like, oh, water fountains are those things you throw the coins in.
Right. That's a water fountain.
Yeah.
A drinking fountain
that's
is what you drink
what
from.
I call it.
Or I personally call them bubblers.
Okay.
But I'm okay with drinking fountain.
Water
fountain is something entirely
different. I've heard
different.
many different definitions, but why exactly do people here call it a bubbler?
Well, as I recall, I believe bubbler was actually a brand name, like Kleenex or anything like that, where it then became kind of the general catch-all term for a drinking fountain. It was now a bubbler. I think that was one of the original drinking fountains was called a bubbler.
Okay.
So that's a little backstory there for you folks. And thanks so much for listening to Bubbler Banter here on the Brew Sports Network. We'll be back next Thursday. Take care.